let's talk about the Rockefellers. John Davison Rockefeller continues to be the most recognized, or perhaps the most despised, rich man in the world, even though he's been dead since 1937. During the past century, not one family in America has assembled such power and influence as the Rockefellers, and it's all thanks to their wealth and their close ties to England. And years ago, the Rockefeller name continuously popped up in any conversation discussing secret societies. But today's mass media rarely speaks of the Rockefellers' role in world events. But at one time, the name John D. Rockefeller was what everyone was talking about, and his finances was known to all. Let's go down this Rockefeller rabbit hole, and this will be a 3-part series as there is a lot to discuss. And one insight to his business philosophy was cited by Nelson Rockefeller. See, when John D. was a small child, his father, William Rockefeller, or Big Bill, also sometimes called Devil Bill, who actually sold cancer cures in a small wagon. Mind you, this is the 1800s we're talking about, selling cancer cures. But anyways, his father was teaching him to jump from a tall chair into his father's arms. And one day as he was leaping off, his father pulled away his arms and he fell to the floor. And he told his son, remember, never trust anyone, not even me. And at the start of the American Civil War, Rockefeller was a young agricultural commodities broker in Cleveland, Ohio, and he quickly recognized the potential of the petroleum industry there. And in 1863, he and some other associates built a refinery. And by 1870, he incorporated the Standard Oil Company of Ohio. See, the National City Bank of Cleveland, which was identified in congressional hearings as one of the 3 Rothschild banks in the United States. And these elites sat Rockefeller down and created a plan to provide the young John D. Rockefeller with money to begin his monopolization of the oil refinery business, resulting in the formation of Standard Oil. And Rockefeller, who was quoted saying competition is a sin, ruthlessly eliminated his competition by either merging or buying them out. And failing that, he cut his prices so low that competitors had to sell. See, what other people didn't know was that he was given the keys to do this by these elites with their funds that they gave him. He also managed to make railroad agreements, which ensured him the monopoly of the oil transportation. And Standard Oil, which is the direct ancestor of Exxon, prospered enormously. And by 1880, 10 years after the incorporation of the Standard Oil Company of Ohio, Rockefeller owned or controlled 95% of all oil produced in the United States. I'm running out of time, but I'm getting into the medical industry and more of the oil next. Like for part 2. This is part 2 of the Rockefellers Exposed. In my last video, I discussed how the Rothschilds funded John D. Rockefeller to have him be the man that monopolizes the oil refinery industry. And everything was going well until 1902. See, there was a publication of a series of articles that was made by this woman right here, Ida Tarbell, who was the daughter of a Pennsylvania oil producer who was run out of business by Rockefeller. And based on 5 years of research, Tarbell's series was published in this magazine titled The History of the Standard Oil Company. And Tarbell's exposure resulted in government and court actions. However, as early as 1882, Rockefeller had moved to mass his business dealings by creating America's first great corporation, Standard Oil Trust. And this trust embraced a maze of legal structures that made it virtually impossible for public investigation or understanding. And this type of maneuvering continued in 1892 when the Ohio Supreme Court ordered the trust to be dissolved. But instead of doing that, Rockefeller moved the trust to New York City. And in 1899, all assets and interests were transferred to a new creation, Standard Oil Company of New Jersey. But in 1906, the United States government charged Standard Oil with the violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. And on May 15th of 1911, the Supreme Court made a decision, and I quote, 7 men and a corporate machine conspired against fellow citizens. And for the safety of the Republic, we now decree that this dangerous conspiracy must be ended by November 15th. And 8 of the companies formed after this decision still held Standard Oil in their names. But even these were soon altered to present the image of diversity. All these gas stations that we see now are just another form of these original companies. But ironically, the breaking up of these companies only resulted in Rockefeller's wealth increasing, and he now owned 1/4 share of the 33 different companies. The elites are all about their symbolism. And shortly after the turn of the 20th century, Rockefeller became America's first billionaire. And the continuation of Rockefeller's control was confirmed in the late 1930s by the only study of true ownership in America's largest corporations ever made by the SEC, or the Securities and Exchange Commission. And this study, which was released in 1940, confirmed the Rockefellers' control in these corporations. And by the time of his death in 1937, Rockefeller and his only son, John D. Rockefeller Jr., had not only built up an amazing oil empire, but established institutions such as the Rockefeller Institute of Medical Research in 1901, the General Education Board in 1903, the University of Chicago in 1889, the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913, and the Lincoln School of 1917.